But who do you say that I am? Well, good morning, St. Augustine's. Who do you say that I am? Let's just start off by saying, don't look at your bulletin which says I am Reverend Jim Dolan, because I am not. I am not Reverend Jim Dolan. You know that. He didn't gain weight and lose all his hair. No. My name is Scott Sherman. I direct the Center for Church Innovation, which is an affiliate of the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley, just over there. I'm a priest in the Diocese of California, and I actually lead an initiative for our diocese that's called Vital and Thriving Congregations. It's actually an effort promoted by Bishop Mark to try to come alongside congregations as we are finding our way on the other side of the pandemic. And I'm really happy that St. Augustine's just met with your vestry last month, and I'm really happy that you're actually going to be joining in this diocesan program. I have to say, it's also really good to be with you today before the feast of St. Augustine tomorrow. And I was really happy to hear that you had the good sense to wait and celebrate the feast at your church picnic next month, which just sounds like a better celebration all around. So congratulations as you celebrate that feast. I mentioned him not only because I'm here, but because this particular text, the gospel today, Matthew 16, it's actually a text that Augustine himself loved. And he preached about it a lot, and there's actually quite a lot of writing that he did about this text, and particularly this idea that in Jesus Christ we have a rock, that we have something solid as God's people that we can center our lives on and count on for vitality and strength no matter what comes. I want us to think about this question Jesus asked his disciples. Who do people say I am? Who do they say the Son of Man is? Who do you say I am? You know, Jesus gives a little bit of a hint when he uses that phrase for himself, Son of Man. It's kind of enigmatic, curious term. It actually comes from the book of Daniel. And it describes a character, the human one is another way to translate it, who, as Daniel describes it, suffers and dies, but is ultimately the instrument that God uses to establish justice at the end of time. So what Jesus is saying by taking that title from the Old Testament text and applying it to himself is, I'm the one by whom God is going to heal the world. So when he asks that question using that name, he's telling them something, right? But the who question is also shaped by where they ask the question. You remember it said they were in Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi. Now, Caesarea could be translated as Caesarville. It's named after Caesar, Caesarville. And it was built by King Herod. And then when King Philip came along, King Philip said, we should call this Philip's Caesarville. So that's what Caesarea Philippi is. It's Philip's Caesarville. Now, for the Jewish people, it was once part of the Promised Land. It was the land of the tribe of Naphtali. But now it's become a regional center in the Roman Empire. And it's a place for the worship of the emperor, who is worshipped at this time as a son of God. And it's here in Philip's Caesarville, that Jesus asked this question. Who do you say I am? And it's the first time when Peter confesses in his answer, it's the first time anyone acknowledges him as the Christ, the Messiah. And what Peter says is actually dangerous. Because what is he saying? He's saying, Jesus, you are the liberator promised by God long ago, the one we've been waiting for. You are the true king who will liberate us from Caesar, the false king. You are the Son of God. He is not the Son of God. He's not the authority by which we should be organizing our lives. You are. You see, there's a deeper reality that Peter's beginning to see by the power of God. He's beginning to see that there's a deeper reality than the political nightmare they're trapped in. The violence, the deception, the chaos of this evil empire does not have the last word. And Jesus is revealing that God's way of love, revealed in Jesus, this radical acceptance, nonviolence, and forgiveness, it's deeper, it's truer, and frankly, it's more powerful than empire. The rock strength is in love, not empire. Now, when Peter makes his confession, Jesus responds in a pretty interesting way. He renames him. Because at this point, he's not Peter, he's Simon. And so Jesus actually gives him a new name in this moment. And that's where the word Peter comes from. Peter is just the word rock. In the Greek language, he actually says, "You are Peter, Petros, and upon this rock, Petra, I will build my church." Now, what on earth does that mean? This is why Augustine loved to write about it, by the way. It's a curious thing. He gives him a name, says he's going to build his church on that rock. What is the rock he's talking about? Well, I think Peter is showing us the way to stability. It's the wise person's house built on rock, not sand. It's grounded in the one thing that Peter, at least momentarily, gets right, and that is who Jesus is. Looking to him, the source of truth. That's the rock that the gates of death, what a powerful picture. It makes me think of the Lord of the Rings and the gates of Mordor. You think of just the image of evil and death and all of its power. He's saying, that cannot shake this rock, this community of love that I'm building. But it's not Peter himself. Jesus is the rock. This is, by the way, this is the bit from Augustine I wanted to read you. This is from a sermon he gave about 1,600 years ago. And on this text he said, he acknowledges Peter's faith. And then St. Augustine writes this: Peter's faith was drowned, though, when the Lord was crucified. Peter, you see, only believed he was the Son of God up to the time he saw him hanging on the cross, the time he saw him fixed there with nails, the time he saw him dead, the time he saw him buried. Then he lost what he held. Where's the rock then? Where's the immovable solidity of the rock? Christ himself was the rock, while Peter was only named from the rock. That's why the rock rose again, to make Peter solid and strong. He says, because Peter would have perished if the rock had lived. Apparently, Augustine was a pretty good preacher, I think. I love that. Peter would have perished if the rock hadn't lived. He gives him a new name, pointing him to himself. Trust in me. I will make you a rock. I will make my church a rock. And then he says, I'm going to give you some keys. Keys, the kingdom of heaven. Now, that, again, what on earth is going on here? Well, in the Jewish world, during the exile, faithful teachers of the Torah were said to have been given the key of David. That is, they still had a way to bring the truth that had oriented them in the past. Jesus then is naming Peter as a faithful teacher. Not the gatekeeper of heaven, though that has been a source of many, many great jokes. And don't worry, I will not tell a St. Peter's Gates joke. I thought about it, but no, I'm not going to do that to you. Rather, it's the idea that for this new Jesus movement that's getting launched, Peter is the chief rabbi. He's the chief rabbi of the movement. And during his lifetime, he's the guarantor that Jesus' teachings are going to be followed. If you look at the lists of the names of the apostles in the New Testament, Peter's name is always listed first. Now, since the 16th century, the Roman Catholics have looked to this text, our siblings of the Roman Catholic Church, have looked at this text to say that what Jesus was doing here was establishing the popes, establishing the papacy. Whereas the Protestant reformers were inclined to say, no, it didn't have anything to do with Peter personally. It's just about his faith. Well, I think they're both kind of right and they're both kind of wrong. That is, it is about Peter's faith, but recent scholars have pointed that it's also talking about a unique and unrepeatable function that Peter had in the early church. It is Peter. He is Rabbi the Rock. I just keep thinking of the Rock when I say that. He's Rabbi the Rock, right? But he points to Jesus. This is for the Protestants, I think, correct. He points us to Jesus, the builder and the chief cornerstone. And then there's one more interesting metaphor that gets used. Not only is he given keys, but he's told, I'm going to give you the authority to bind and loose. And whatever you bind and loose on earth will be bound and loosed on heaven. What on earth is he talking about? Well, again, in the rabbinic world of Judaism, this term has meaning. It's describing the work that a rabbi does of guiding a community in faithfulness to God. Binding, discerning what's wrong. Loosing, discerning what's right and just and best. I mean, they're both pretty important, right? If you're going to be faithful and if you're going to live justly. And what's promised here by Jesus is to Peter first, is I'm going to give you heaven's power. I'm going to give you my presence when you're in the thick of it against the gates. Because trust me, the gates are coming for you. The gates are real. That power of death and evil and oppression is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to loose heaven's power in your community as you follow my way of love. I'm going to give you authority, the keys to bind and to loose. Now, it begins with Peter, but as you're going to see in a few weeks in the Gospel of Matthew, when you get to chapter 18, Jesus actually gives this over to the whole community of disciples. And he says to all of them, I've given you the authority to bind what you bind and loose on earth will be loosed and bound with heaven's power. You're going to have God's blessing as you get into it against the gates. And that's good news because we don't have Peter anymore. Peter's buried underneath that big church in Rome. And he's in the presence of God. We don't have Peter. We have Pope Francis, and he's great. And we have great leaders like presiding Bishop Curry, who we're all praying for as he faces surgery. We have some great leaders, but I think the point of this text, and the point that Matthew's trying to bring home to us is, we have each other. You have each other. We have the church. We have this community. And Jesus' promise is that by the Spirit, his way can be known and discerned. His power can be experienced despite the power of the gates. I woke up early this morning. I was nervous about being late coming out here. And I read the New York Times, and I read a wonderful article about John Lewis, the late John Lewis, and his role as just a 23-year-old kid in the March on Washington, which is 60 years ago tomorrow, and how he and a small group of people, the incredible authority they had to shape a movement towards justice and love where it could have gone in all kinds of directions. That's the power of the keys, to know the way of Jesus and let it shape how you get into it with the things you engage. Maya Angelou wrote some wonderful, wrote 3 memoirs, and the last one is called Mom and Me and My Mom. And in it, I've been thinking about this lately. She tells the story of how she got a job in San Francisco during World War II as a streetcar conductor, except they were called conductorettes. She saw that the men had been sent off to the war and they were starting to hire white women as conductors, and she was bound to determine that she was going to be a conductorette. And she went, of course, she was brushed off, but her mother would not let her take no, and kept sending her and sending her and sending her until she was finally hired as the first black woman conductorette of the streetcar in San Francisco. Well, they gave her a shift that started at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the thing she emphasizes in the memoir is the role of her mother, Miss Vivian Baxter, because she was the one who insisted she keep applying, persisting until she got the job. But then her mother drove her to work, and I want to read you what Maya Angelou wrote. She said, so we got into her car and we drove to the beach, and I thanked her. She said, now you go. I told her to go home, take care of herself. She said, time then I saw the pistol on the seat. And she said she was going to follow that streetcar until the sun rose. And then she would honk her horn and blow me a kiss, and then she'd drive home. And for the entire time I worked on the streetcar, my mother's routine never changed. I love this woman. Don't you love this woman? I've been thinking a lot about this as I think about the work that happens inside our congregations here in the Diocese of California. And particularly in this new initiative, this Vital and Thriving initiative, where we're trying to think, I don't think we need Mama Baxter's pistol, but I think we do need that kind of courage. We need that kind of perseverance. And here's the thing I really want you to hear. We need that kind of creativity. That was some serious creativity coming together in love in the face of the gates. What's it going to take to live into God's dream for the world instead of our nightmare? What's going to take to dismantle oppression in all its pernicious forms? I don't know. But I do know it's going to take us. It's going to take all of us together in love, finding the strength from heaven's rock. Amen.